So at this point, I want to introduce Ashley Stevenson. She's going to show us how to master visual materials and visual impressions.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome again. Thank you, Cindy. And let me just switch here to my AutoCAD screen, actually in Giza. So with visual impression, of course, we always have to start with a drawing. So I'm going to show you really quickly what drawing we're starting with, and we can begin the drawing in either Giza or AutoCAD with CAT. I know that there are users for both platforms out there. So here's what the drawing will look like in Giza. We have our conference room off to the right, and notice I've pulled a few items off to the left outside. You'll see what that looks like when we get to visual impression. And here's the same drawing in AutoCAD. So that's how your scenes would look. You can see I have a scene bound created around my area. So now I want to launch visual impression. So I'm going to come up to the toolbar. Again, you can do this in Giza as well. I'm just going to click Visualize Scenes. I only have one scene in the drawing, so once visual impression loads, we'll see that as an option there. Okay, so I'm going to select my conference room here. This is basically the end product of what we're going to create today. You can see a little preview image there. So I'm going to select that scene. And bear with me, I had a little bit of a glitch happen when I was creating this earlier. Let me just remove one thing really quickly. There we go. All right, so from a 3D view, here is what the scene looks like currently. I've added finishes to some of the items we're not working with today, but you can see there are some items in here that are still kind of a blank canvas. Those are the ones we're going to be applying finishes to. So let me scroll around here, and behind this wall, I have some of the items that we're going to start with. So the general overview of CAD today is going to be, again, working with visual materials. We'll be going and applying, creating, and managing our visual materials through multiple design applications. So I wanted to make you able to relate to these specific applications and how you would use visual materials in your real job. So to start out, we're going to work with, the first item that we'll work with is applying materials to an item that is not enriched. So some of our products in our catalogs have not been enriched yet, meaning when you select your materials, you can't visualize them right away. Another item that we'll work on is going to be applying a COM, or customer's own material, to an item that has standard finishes. As we know, with customer's own material, we won't be able to see those materials because they'll come from other sources. Then we'll work on applying standard materials onto our specials. So I have, right here you can see there's a standard item that we'll apply finishes to on the right. And then on the left, we're going to, we have the custom that I've created here. So we'll talk about both of those and how to apply those standard finishes onto our custom parts. And then we'll talk about how to add materials to an item that is not in our catalog at all. So I have a custom item here. I could have either drawn this from scratch or pulled it in from a third party, like here with this refrigerator. So we'll work with that item. And then we will, at the end of class, we'll talk about how to apply materials to our architecture. Many times you'll work on a project where you have project-specific materials that maybe the architect has picked for you or things like that, of that nature. So whether you have your own material that you can bring in or we have one in our suppliers list, you'll see in a few moments here. So we'll work through both of those options. So that's kind of an overview of what we'll be covering in this webcast today. So let's get started. I'm going to work on this conference chair first. So to zoom in on this area, so I'm going to just isolate the chair, so I turn everything else off. And then I'm going to zoom into my chair here, so we're really focusing on the one item. Once I have it selected, I do have the materials button up here. Once I select that, we can actually work through applying our standard finishes. So we're going to work with a grade 3 today, and I'm just going to work with some messenger fabric, and we'll work into a capri colorway. And as far as our fire treatment, I'm going to do no selection for that today. And we'll pick a mirror-based finish, which is a reflective surface there. And we'll just do some hard casters. So I just added some standard finishes to the chair, but you can see it's not being applied like it normally would if it was enriched. So I'm going to just change the angle here so we can see everything nicely. Now do is go in and add those finishes manually using visual materials. But in order to add those, I actually need to switch to a new tab. So far with materials, we've worked in select. That was where we picked our finishes. And then summary, once we were done selecting the finishes, it's an overview of all the items we've selected so far. The third tab is advanced. When I click on advanced, you can see all the different layers within my chair. So now that we have these layers visible, I know exactly where the different materials need to be added to this specific item. Next, I'm going to open up visual materials. So up at the top right of my screen, it is a separate button here. I'm just going to click that to launch it. It opens in a new separate window. I'm just going to expand this here so we can see it very nicely. Now we need to apply these finishes. So we are going to, go through, and I'm going to pick my fabric first. So I'm going to notice we have 3 tabs: generic, suppliers, and manufacturers. Generic is just that. They're very generic finishes. We go there from time to time, but for the most part, we'll stick around suppliers and manufacturers. Suppliers, I'm going to click on this little triangle here to expand the menu, and you can see all the different suppliers we have in our library. So the one we're going to work with today is Maharam, since it was the messenger fabric. So I pick Maharam. When I select them, or just click Maharam the word, you get a lot of different thumbnails over here. It's a lot to look at. So instead, I'm going to click on the triangle over here to just expand this further. And now we can see all of the different patterns. So the pattern we want to work with today is messenger. I'm going to select messenger. Now I can see our colorways. You'll find that some manufacturers, some of our suppliers, have them named a little cryptically. I've gone through and found the one that matches the item I want. This is the Capri color for messenger. So I'm just going to select that thumbnail here. And now you can see down at the bottom, we can get a nice preview, and we can see the repeat over here on the view cube. Once I have that item selected, we need to create a shortcut so that we can access it later, because there's going to be other items we want to apply this finish to. So right here, I'm going to click Create Shortcut. And it's going to ask us to choose a color palette. We haven't created one for this project yet, so I'm going to click on the plus sign here to create a new palette. Now I can come in here. I'm going to just type in webcast for today's project, and we'll say OK. The moment I did that, over here on the left where color palettes are listed, you can see webcast has appeared, and it flashed for a moment. Now if I click on that palette, you can see all the materials inside. So far we only have the one because we just added the Capri fabric. So we now need to go through, and remember we had a metal, and I think that we need some caster materials. So I'm going to come back up here. I'm going to minimize my harem so we can scroll through here a little bit easier. When we're working with materials like chromes or things like of that nature, maybe a metal, plastic, if it's a manufacturer that's not enriched, I recommend coming to our demo, data demo catalog here, the 2020 enriched data demo. You can also access any of the other manufacturers that you might have loaded from our disk, but this is the one that I tend to go to. Inside this menu, I'm going to come through and go to metal. And we just want to pick a chrome to pick for that base, since I picked that mirror finish. I'm going to select chrome over here. Again, we have the Create Shortcut option. I'm going to click on Create Shortcut. It's going to ask me where I want to save it. I'm going to go ahead and select Webcast. Again, you can see that this flashes over here to let me know it's saved. And the last one I need to add is just a black finish for our casters. So I'm going to come down here. I'm actually going to select data demo. I'm not sure where black might be. So we have a search function. Once I select the, at least the manufacturer or the supplier I want, up here you can see there's 396 items. It's a lot to look at. So to drill that down a little bit further, we have a search bar. I can type in the word black to look for a black finish. Now I can select the black finish here, create a shortcut, just like we did before, and send it to our webcast folder. Now that we have our finishes for our chair, we should be able to go back in to Visual Impression. So I'm going to minimize VI materials, And now I have my chair selected. Remember, we show the different layers that our chair is broken down into. And sometimes it's really hard to tell what layer is what, so we have these very clear colors selected for you. So I can see that the red layer is the arm, the green layer is kind of the arm pad, if you will, and so on. So now to apply the finishes we just found and save, I'm going to click on the webcast folder. The first one here is that fabric. So I just need to drag that onto the layer that's appropriate. So I'm going to left click, hold my cursor down, and drag it to that orange-yellow layer, yellow-orange layer, and release. Now you can see that that fabric has been visualized. Now if you ever want to get back to the original layer colors to really see how those apply, you can always uncheck the box up here, and you can get back to those happier colors, if you will, to kind of see how those layers lay out, just to check yourself. Next, we want to apply our, let's say, our chrome. We know that we need to go to the base, and I want that to go underneath the arm pad. So I'm going to drag my finish to the blue layer. Then I'm going to drag my finish to the red layer. Again, that's going to the base and just under the arm caps here. Now I want the black finish to go to my casters, probably my mechanism, and our arm pads. So I'm going to drag this to the purple caster, then to the mechanism here, and up here to just under the arm pad, or on the arm pad. Now, if I check the box for visualize, you can see my materials appear. All right, so that is how we go through and add materials to an item that's not enriched. Again, you went into that visual materials tool. I'm just going to switch back down here. You can always switch between the two programs. You can see visual impression is the little sparkler down here in my taskbar, and visual materials kind of looks like a spiky rainbow ball, if you will. And that's how we can get back and forth. So of course we went in here, we looked under manufacturers for the standard finishes we could find, any suppliers that were necessary, things like that. Let me switch back to visual impression here, and we can move on to the next part. I'm just going to change our orientation here. And, oh, one other thing, sorry, before I move on. I'm working on this chair, and I actually, back here behind my wall, I have a scene working. I'm just going to have this wall selected, and I'm actually going to take it away. You can actually see the scene in the background. And back here, you can see the scene. Not sure what's happening on my edge here, but the scene is back here. And I actually want to apply these finishes that we just applied to this chair to all the chairs in the scene. So back in the summary panel of my materials panel, I'm going to click Apply More Items. So the second option here allows me to look for specific items like this one, anything accepting all of the options above, no more, no less. I'm going to click Apply, keep an eye on these chairs back here, and now you can see in our scene back there, every chair like this one has these materials applied. Okay, now we're really ready to move to the next one. So I'm going to select my second option here, and again I can use my isolate and zoom tools here. So I'm not looking at anything else, just this chair here. So this chair, our focus is going to be customer's own material. So first I'm going to select all these finishes that we can as standard. So again, we're in our materials activity, so the pane is open over here. I do not want to select anything for that certification for the burn test for right now. We'll go ahead and do no moisture barrier. I'm just going to keep it pretty simple. We'll pick 2 legs and 2 casters. You can see the casters back here in the legs. Now we need to pick the wood finish for those legs up front. I'm going to scroll down here, and I'm going to pick our English walnut here. Left click on that. You can see those materials appear when they are visualized, or sorry, when they are enriched. I'm not going to add a tablet to this chair. Again, we're going to keep this pretty simple. No receptor, no stove. Now there is an option for a black underseat storage shelf. Notice the shelf is visual here. I'm going to select this option. But the black does not apply. So you will find sometimes that a finish does not apply where it maybe should. So we're going to go through and fix that as well. All right. now we're to our fabric. And we can see up here, that's the group we're working on, our fabric grade selection. And again, we want to select the group for COM. It's also going to allow us to see group 1. So I'm going to select that, and it brings me to these two options here, customer's own material or grade 1. I'm going to select customer's own material since that is our focus for this chair. And now I want to select, basically apply what I can back to those other chairs that are in the background, so that's fine. But we do want to add our COM still. So as you might imagine, we need to see what our layers look like. I'm going to come to the Advanced tab up here. Now we can see those layers that are missing. So for this chair, I'm actually going to apply 2 different COMs so you can see how that occurs. I'm going to apply one to the arms and one to the back and the seat. Now for the back and the seat, I'm actually going to use the same COM that we did, or the same material that we did on our conference chair. So that's already in here. I can go to the webcast section, find that material, here's that capri fabric, and I can drag this now to the red layer. And we can see that, oh, whoops, actually, sorry, if you ever make a mistake and you want to clear that out, you can always remove a finish, just like when I hover over it, you can see the X appears, and I can remove it. I actually want that to go to the seat in the back. So go back into Advanced, select the finish, and I'm going to drag it to the purple section. And there we go. The other one that we're missing is the shelf down here. I want to make that black shelf that it mentioned. We already have a black finish, so let's apply that as well. So we have that. Now I have one more COM that I do want to apply. So I'm going to switch over to Visual Materials. Again, if it's not already launched, I could click on the button, but we have it open already, so I'm just going to switch on it down here. Here's Visual Materials. And now I want to add, or pick up that fabric for the arms. So I picked one before class today, or before this webcast. I'm going to come into, where am I? I'm going to go into my supplier. I want a fabric supplier. We're going to use Arcon this time. And the one I want to use today is actually called Tempo. I'm going to scroll down here, select Tempo. Now it looks like nothing's here. This is something that often happens. We'll forget to clear out our search. So notice it's trying to look for black fill. I'm going to come up here and remove my search. Now you can see we're in Tempo. We have 2 colorways. If I scroll up, you can see the rest. I want to use this one here. So I'm going to select the finish. Now notice you can see that here. And we want to, again, create our shortcut. So I'm going to click that button, send it to the webcast folder. And now you can see when we click on webcast over here, it's now been finished. So now I'm going to switch back to visual impression. That was the last finish we needed for our COM. Again, it's in our color palette in that Advanced tab. Select the item I want, left click, and drag it to the correct layer. Now you can see our COM chair is completely finished. Now again, we want to apply that to everything back here. So I'm going to click away so you can see everything in the drawing. So I'm going to find my chair again, just by selecting it. Go to the Summary tab. Notice there are 4 of these chairs back here. Come down to the bottom. Apply to more items. Items accepting all of the options above. Click Apply. Now you can see all those chairs. So we're coming together rather nicely back there. So the next items that we're going to work on, so that was the COM. So far we've done a non-enriched item and added finishes. Then we've done our COM item and a missing finish, I might add. And now we're going to work on a custom part. So I took a standard item, like this table over here, and I simply extruded it to make it a little bit longer. So I did that in either Ziva or AutoCAD. And so we've modified it. And now I've saved it as a special. But notice when I click on that special, no options appear, even though I could add a standard finish to it. So what we're going to do first is check out what standard finishes we want to use on this standard part here. So that's why I put these side by side. Now you don't have to go through and do the standard first. I'm just doing it for example purposes. So I have my table selected. We're going to go ahead and add our standard finishes first. I'm going to ask us about the base. Then we're going to come down here. I'm going to do a base veneer grade 1. I'm going to scroll down here, and we're going to keep everything kind of walnut looking. I'm going to do clear walnut. And this is another finish that doesn't apply as it should, so we'll go back there and fix that in Visual Materials. Now we want a base type. What I'm going to work with today is just our flared bases here. Next we need to pick our wood edge. So I'm going to make this match everything else, so clear walnut. We need our edge type. I'm just going to do a flat wood edge. I'm just picking through our standard finishes here. So our top veneer, again, I'm going to pick a grade 1 to stay consistent, and our clear walnut. So you can see that that material does take shape there. For some reason, the base isn't coming through on this one, so we'll fix that in Visual Materials as well. So now we have some options down here. Maybe I want to pick this first one, and I don't want these ones, so I'll just use the stars and bars function here. And come back to bars. There we go. Okay, so we have our finishes applied, everything that's standard. I don't have any other items like this in here, just my specials, so we don't really need to apply to anything else. I do want to show you, though, we are missing that one finish, so I want to go pick that up in Visual Materials so we can apply it in Advanced. So I'm going to switch to the Advanced tab. Notice these are the missing materials, our wood and our chrome up here. Well, we already have a chrome that we can put on the metal up top. We'll go to Webcast. Take my chrome, and I'm going to drag that to the green layer. Now I need to find that wood. So this is a coalesce table that I picked prior, so you can see that down here when I select it, that's the actual product line we're working with. So when I switch over to Visual Materials, I know that material exists because it applied to the top already. So I just need to come in here and find it. So let me close up Supplier. I want to come to Manufacturers. Find the manufacturer we're working with. Here we are. Oh, we have two options here. I'm going to go with the one with the greater amount. I'm going to open this up. And we're going to go into wood. And this one is a hardwood and a semi-gloss. There we go. So here are all of our options. But it's a little hard to tell exactly which one is the one that we want. They're not named quite the same. If you're ever looking for a finish that you know exists in here and you've used it elsewhere, whenever we use it in our panel over here, you'll notice it's appearing. So my top here shows up right here in the layer, and if I hover over it, you can see there's a description there. And that tells me what that finish is called. So when I hover, you can see the 3702, and at the end it's 3702 1999. We're going to go back to Visual Materials. And again, up in my search up here, I'm going to type in 3702. There we go. So this is the option we want. So I can just select the item, come down here, just like we did before, select Create Shortcut. You guessed it, we're going to go to Webcast. It's going to come over here. We can see that it's been added to everything. Let's clear the search here. Here's our list of finishes. Now we can switch to Visual Impression. All right, so we have this wood finish here. That's what we want to use. So I'm going to drag that up to the red layer. And now you can see the base matches the top because we used the exact same finish. So when I hover over that, you can see it's the 3702, just like this one here. All right, so that's adding finishes just to a standard item if they're missing something. Well, now I want to apply those same standard finishes over to this table. So I'm going to select the table. Again, because it's special or a custom item that I modified from a standard, notice my available options are not appearing. I'm going to come to the Advanced tab, find the Webcast folder. Now we've already pulled our finishes because we did it over here for those legs that were missing. So I have my fun colors here to spell it out for me. So I need to drag this to the red layer, drag this to the yellow layer, and now we have that green layer left. That's the chrome. I'll drag that to the green layer, but it's still telling us we're missing a layer. There's a blue layer we don't quite see. Many times this will happen and you can't see it at this view. I'm going to just right-click here and tilt my drawing up, and you can see it's actually the support structure that we're missing. So that would be a chrome finish as well. It was already applied over here. I'm going to drag that to the blue. And now you can see that looks nice. All right, and you guessed it, we're going to apply this to the items back there. So we're going to switch back to the Summary tab now that we're finished here. And I'm going to apply to items accepting all of the options above. Now this is the exact same item back here, so it'll take it. I'll click Apply. Oh, and it did not. Well, that's okay. If that happens for some reason, I can select the item back here, go to Advanced, and do the drag and drop just like we did before. I must have changed that in some fashion between when I did my first demo of this and today, so I apologize. But here we go. We'll just drag those in, and now you can see that those finishes have applied nicely for us. All right, so a recap of where we are so far. We did a non-enriched item here. We applied finishes to it. We applied a COM to an item that would take finishes. We worked on a standard item missing a finish, and then a custom of that standard. Lastly, as far as our items actually standing here, this item was a complete custom. So here I need to add my own finishes, completely from scratch, so to speak. So I'm actually going to look through our generic tab this time when I go to apply finishes for this guy. But I am going to zoom in here, just like we did before. All right, we've got our refrigerator. I'm going to go to the Advanced tab. Of course, there's nothing in Select and Summary because this is not a catalog item at all. So in Advanced, when I made this special before, I broke it down into 2 layers so that we have the bulk of the refrigerator and we have the pulls of the refrigerator. So those can be 2 separate finishes if we'd like. Maybe we want to have the refrigerator be a black refrigerator. I can go into Webcast and I could drag that to refrigerator, and you can see that in there. Maybe I want it to be chrome instead. I can drag and drop, and notice you can see the chrome is picked up. Maybe I want to grab a little lighter metal on the actual pull. Now I need to go find another finish. So we're going to go back to Visual Material. You can see there's a lot of back and forth here when you're applying your own visual materials. We're going to go into Generic. And this time I am going to use generic materials, and I'm just going to go into Metal. And under Grayscale, we have a couple of different options here. There's a couple of gray brush ones I like to work with. I'm going to select this gray 50 here. I'll create that shortcut. Again, I'm going to send that to Webcast, and then I'm going to use the lighter gray here, and we'll do that for the pulls, so they're a little easier to see. And I'll create that shortcut as well. Okay, so you can see our Webcast folder is growing. So now I can go back to Visual Impression. We have our refrigerator already selected. Now I'm going to drag these specific finishes we want. So here's the darker brush, and here's the lighter brush onto the pull. So you can see that that looks nice on there as well. Now if we had anything else that we wanted to drag and drop, of course we could come back into Visual Materials, pick those finishes, and add them to the Webcast folder, and so on. So that's adding items to a number of different furniture pieces. The next thing we're going to talk about is architecture and extras. So again, we had a non-enriched item, a COM, a special, and a completely customized item, something I completely built myself, not in our catalog. All right, so let's spin around here to our scene. One second here. There we go. So here we have our scene. And in our scene, you can see all of our materials have been applied that we've selected so far, but there's a couple of things I want to modify. So the first of these I want to touch on is the walls. Let's just, I'm going to make you some clean white walls. One of the things I like to make apparent is when I select walls at first, I'm going to go ahead and just put the white here. We'll just use coconut cream. Notice they apply to all the walls. This is something to always be careful of when you start applying a custom or an accent finish to a wall. Now that's the next step we're going to go to, but we want to make sure we uncheck this box, apply to all walls. So this is fine for our primary color, but now we want our accent color. So I'm going to uncheck that, select the wall that I want to apply the accent to. You can see the yellow grid on there. Now I'm going to select, before we've been in the Wall tab, I want to select the Accent tab. Notice when I select that, we have a lot of different options here. We have textures, so I could switch it to a brick if I wanted to. maybe I don't like the look of that. I could switch it to any of these. There also are colors. Lastly, you guessed it, palette. So here we can go in and actually access our palette. So the next thing I want to do is we're going to go through, and I'm actually going to make this a wood accent wall. So we're going to come back over to Visual Materials. Again, I'm going to use the Generic tab, and I'm going to go into the Wood section. And I'm going to pick just our assorted wood here. And let me find the one that I was going to use. There we go. Dark Pecan. So I'll pick that. I can create a shortcut for this just like we did before. I'm going to send it to Webcast. Check Webcast. It is there. There's our Dark Pecan. Come back to Visual Impression. Come back to that wall. Select Webcast. And here's the finish we want to use, that Dark Pecan. Now, a couple things are not looking exactly how I want them to. Notice the scale might be a little off. The color might be a little bit off. A couple of things we might want to fix. We can do that with Visual Materials as well. So I'm going to go back to Visual Materials. I'm going to go into that Webcast folder, and we actually want to talk about this Dark Pecan here. So I'm going to pick on that. Notice when I do that, where we had created the shortcut before, we have a little more flexibility here. We can go into create a custom material out of this specific image. So I'm going to select that, and it allows me to change the properties of this finish. So maybe the repeat needs to be a little larger. Maybe I want it to be 16 inches instead. And if you want that to be equal, you can always maintain the aspect ratio so that it'll stick to be whatever it needs to be. So if you change the scale later, maybe to 20, notice the width and the height changed together. I'll put that back to, say, 15 and see how that looks. I can change how this renders as well. So you can see we can change this from a metal to a wood to a paint. We'll go ahead and keep this at wood. Basically, this changes the reflection properties. So we'll keep this, we can keep it as a hardwood, and we could keep it as a rough wood if we wanted. It could be something that's sanded fine, lots of different options here. We'll just keep it here. We don't really want it to reflect too much on our wall, so we'll leave it at rough. And I have some other options here if I wanted to apply a coating. I'll keep it at none for now. All right, so I might say here, this is going to be modified. I might say that in my description, so I recognize it's not the exact same Dark Pecan. And now I'm going to change the color. Remember, it was a little bit off from our woods in the view. So what I want to do here, I have some controls. Notice as I drag across my cursor here, that wood preview is changing. Now I have a setting that I know it needs to be, that I played with earlier. So we're just going to change that a little bit. And it should match pretty nicely. I won't get it exact, but change this slightly. There we go. Now that I have all the color changed I want, I can say Save, Webcast. Notice now we have two different pecans. One that is the modified, and that one is shortcut. I know that this one's not the shortcut because I don't have that little arrow. This is my own custom material. All right, so now I'm going to come back to Visual Impression. I have my wall selected. Now I want to pick on the one without the shortcut, Dark Pecan. You can see the color looks quite a bit better now. I still want to play with my repeat a little bit, but we'll leave it as is for now and move on. Okay, so the next thing I want to work on is our floor. I actually have some extras here. I've applied some rugs to look like a carpet insert in the middle of our room, and I want to apply a finish to those. When I select them and go to the Materials panel, notice they have a palettes option. So this time what we want to do is I actually want to bring in my own material. Of course, I could always reference what's in Visual Materials anytime we want, but now what I want to do is bring in my own. So the first thing I want to do is actually go out and find the finish. So I have a website that I typically go to for carpets. Let me just pull that up here. So I have Milliken's website, and I have a carpet that I specifically want to work with today. Now I could have gone in and searched for that, but I won't waste your time doing that today. So we have a nice image here, and there's a high resolution option. So when we bring in our own materials, there's a couple of things we need to consider. First, we need to make sure that the repeat looks good and it's a high resolution picture. The second thing we want to make sure is that we have an idea of the scale. Now we can always change the scale like you saw me do before, but if we have an idea, it's helpful. So down here you can see that this is a 13-foot 6-inch item. I think that repeat is probably not exact, so we'll play with that a little bit. And the last thing we want to pay attention to is when we download that image, is there any text? So I have this image saved. Here's the high res. Notice it's a clean image. There's no text. There's no border around it. It's completely clean. What you might find from time to time is when I double click on this one, had I maybe captured a different image that does have text on there, I'll show you what happens when you have that in and bring it in. It repeats just like the whole image would. So I brought in 2 different images from that website. Now I'm going to come back to visual material. So we have our 2 images. I have one that's clean and one that's not. We're going to start with the one that's not so clean, just to show you what could happen. So in visual materials, to bring in our own material, I come over here and come down to my palette. We're done with our generic suppliers and materials, so I'll just close those out. Come down to palette, select webcast, and notice when I click on webcast, we get a plus sign here, and when I hover, you can see it adds user material. So I'll click on that. It's going to have us go through this dialog box. I'm going to select an image file. First, I'm going to bring in the messy one. So let me bring that in, and it's a JPEG. So here's the one that was not a perfect screen, that image. I'll open that up. And we can define its properties in here. So we'll just call this, I'm going to call this striation 1. It is a carpet. It is a nylon, so we don't want this to be reflective. And I'll just put these in here. You don't have to add all of these options, but I like to have them in there. Next, I can have my, this is where I can put in my repeat. So this is probably, I would guess, about 12 inch by 12 inch. We'll see how that looks, and we can always modify. It might be 24 by 24. And if I needed to, if the rotation, when it comes in, if it doesn't look right, we can always change the rotation here as well. Notice if I type in 90, when I go in here to view this, you'll actually see the preview rotate. So I'm going to come in here and I'll say save. Here's our striation. Now when I select it in my webcast folder, we can go back to material properties, and here's again where I can change that rotation. So I can change this to 0, and notice on my view cube, that's where I can do this. So this is great for railroading purposes as well, if you ever need to. But keep in mind, notice we have a little white stripe running through here, and a gray stripe on my cube. This is where it's really important to bring in that clean image. All right, so I'm going to come back to visual impression. Oops. Here we go. Select my item, come up to webcast, select that item. And there's my repeat. Now the fabric part of it looks great, but look at those gray and white lines. That's what will happen if you grab an image that has text on it. It's going to repeat that too and think that that's part of the fabric. So we're going to come back into visual material. This is the last one. We're going to come back to webcast, add a user material, select an image file, grab my Milliken solid. This is the other one that I selected that was clean. Open that up. And I can make these changes here, so I might just say solid Milliken, something to let me know what I'm working with. Those options are fine. Let's say this is 24 by 24. Save. Come back to visual impression. Select the item, and now if I just want to change it out, same thing as we did before. Click on webcast, find the image we want, and voila, we have our final rendering for us. So, to recap, we covered a lot of items here. We talked about applying materials to an item that is not enriched. That was our conference chair here. We talked about applying a customer's own material to an item that does accept finishes, like these chairs here. We also applied standard materials to a custom, so this guy here, even though it didn't allow us to have the finishes because it was custom, we were able to find the standard finishes in the coalesce folder. Then we also went through, and as I turn the corner here, you can see our refrigerator back there. That is a custom part completely, and we added our silver finishes to that. Then we have we talked about modifying architecture. We added finishes to a wall. We modified one of the finishes in the library already, modified the color, the scale. And lastly, we went in and brought in our own material, and we picked the repeat and how it renders. So here's the best part. We're going to see how it renders. I'm just going to do a quick high-quality version, and you'll see how this comes together nicely. So you can see all of our reflections come in. We do have a hard surface down here, and we have some soft shadows fall across our carpet. Our aluminum, or the chrome, is reflecting really nicely with the light. And if I went to H2+, you would see one step further. All right, so that ends basically what we were talking. Hopefully now, going over these different design applications will help you to become a visual materials master yourself. All right, so I think we're going to open this up for some questions here in just a minute. Cindy, do you want me to pass this to you?
Sure. We have about 10 minutes left, so we're going to try to answer as many questions as we can. If we don't get to your question, I think we're going to compile these and we'll send them out after the session. One of the questions, actually I'm going to try to hit a couple of them at the same time. One of the questions is, how do I load supplier material? Just to answer that quickly, when you install your software and your catalogs from the catalog disk, it will ask you if you want to install information for visual impression, and it will ask you at that point if you want to install the generic catalog and the supplier material.
And I believe it's just before it asks you about the catalogs themselves as far as products, if I remember correctly when you go through those disks. But it's this section here on my screen. It's the supplier section. That's what we're referring to, and the generic section up here.
A couple of the other questions that we had were related to how you drew the walls of visual impression. And there was a couple of questions about importing architecture into visual impression. At this point, we are not actually importing walls or the architecture into visual impression. Those are actually created within the tool itself, and they're created to imply the architecture.
So as you, to add to Cindy's point really quickly, I'm going to switch over to my AutoCAD drawing. You can see I do have walls in there, but those are not exactly the walls that I have in visual impression. I just did the best that I could to make them very similar. You can modify these walls that are automatically placed by the visual impression system. Notice if I hover over a wall and left-click and drag, I can actually change the size of them or how they're placed, and I can change that dimension. You can see it gives you reference dimensions along the way. Now, I had a wall in there that was in the center. That's one of our extra features. So one of our architecture. So when you go to the room tab, under architecture, there's walls. And this is just a partition wall. So I had placed a partition wall. I'm just left-clicking and hovering in here. And you can change the size of this, and I just made it fit the entire width of my room. And I just basically hovered over a bold part of the wall until I get the 4 arrows, left-click, and drag. So now in my 3D view, you can see that that wall is there. And to remove it, I just select it. Since it's an item that was brought in visual impression, I can just click this little remove button down here in the bottom right corner, and now it's gone. Okay, sorry, Cindy, go ahead.
That's okay. There were also several questions about how to create a custom in CAP and bring that in visual impression. Fortunately, we've actually covered that in one of our visual impression user forums in the past. And we have a couple of videos, both one for CAP and one for Giza, that are posted on YouTube now. So in the Q&A section, I think we've listed the link several times, but we'll try to make those more visible too and put them in the follow-up to this session. But there's a lot of detail in it. Did you cover rotation?
I did slightly. I'll go over very briefly again. If I'm in, for instance, let me find something that has a good, here we go. So here's our COM here. We have a clear vertical pattern going on right here. If I come back into my visual materials and I go into webcast, here's that material that was in question. So if I go in and I create a custom material from this item, notice when I create a custom material, it allows me to add a rotation. So here I could type in 90 and save. Now let me put this little blurb in here. In the name, I'm going to call this rotate, or maybe 90 degree or something like that, maybe railroaded for RR. I'll say save. I'm going to save it to webcast. So now, it doesn't look like it's changing here, but when we get into our actual drawing, back in Visual Impression, I go to Material, I go to my Advanced, and I go to that specific layer, I go to Webcast, and here's the rotated one. So see, I named it the RR for Railroad. Drag and drop that on there. Oh, looks like that one actually didn't quite modify, but normally that's how you would go that, and you would just change the rotation that way. Not sure why that didn't pick up on us. Not sure why that's not working there. Let me go ahead and save. And come back in here. And drag that. There we go. So there's that rotation that happened. Now you can see it's in the opposite. It's railroaded now.
Okay, so the questions are coming in fast and furious right now.
Way more than we can handle.
And we only have about 5 minutes left. So I'm going to catch some of the earlier questions, and we'll grab some of the later ones as we go along. One of the popular questions is, how did we get that appliance, and what do we do if it's not layered appropriately?
Do you want me to go through the steps?
Well, I don't know that we need to just, yeah.
Okay, so very briefly, what I first did to grab the appliance, one of my favorite tools is in AutoCAD, but you can also go out on the web as well. If you're a Giza user, that's okay too. I can go in and we go to the, I think it's an Insert tab. There's a quick search feature. Let me close Visual Impression here. But basically, there's a quick search feature for Autodesk Speak. And there's many other websites out there as well, but that's one of my favorites. Just type in what you're looking for. I typed in refrigerator. A lot of different options came in. I looked for one that had a 2D or a 3D specifically, but 2D and a 3D is helpful. You want both. And then when you're in AutoCAD, you bring it in. It's probably going to be a block. Since it's not one of ours, you can go ahead and explode it, and then you're going to create your own layers. Create one for instance, mine was a refrigerator. So I'm going to, I would basically have this exploded. I would have my refrigerator be one layer, and then I created another one for poles. And when I create my cap part, which is up here, there's a cap part tool. To create that, you walk through the wizard, and it'll ask for a plan view and a 3D. So I created both of those. You just need the plan view in here. And, whoops, and then that came into my Visual Impression as a 3D as well.
I'm going to hit on something real quick. How did you get it into ghost mode for an individual?
Oh, great question. Okay, that's really quick. Oh gosh, let me launch Visual Impression again. So in Visual Impression, there are in the dashboard down at the bottom of our screen, down here, there are two buttons. There is an isolate button, which ghosts everything else. Oh, I don't know why these walls keep coming in here, but so I selected my item, and down here there are two buttons. There's a dark gray box, isolate, so that ghosted everything else, and then this one is zoom, and it zooms straight to the item. The other feature that I did was I turned the wall off. If you don't want to look at it, and you want it in your drawing still, I can uncheck for visibility down here, and it just goes away. To bring it back, I just come to the visibility pane here, search by what's not visible, and it comes straight to the top, check it back on. It's very brief, but I do have a full Visual Impression class that you can take, and I'll show you the screen for that in just a moment.
Well, I'm going to wrap this up because we have a few things to do. We are getting questions flying in, so we will take advantage of answering those questions. There's also the way some of the questions are grouped. It's also setting us up for future webcasts. So we'll try to organize those and take those as suggestions for future things that people would like to see. So actually, there's a couple of things she'd like to say about training, and then I'll wrap up after she's done.
All right, so in regards to training, if you are interested in more education about our products, since again, we are opening this up quarterly to any of our products that you see listed here, CAD, Giza, Worksheet, and Visual Impression. We do have some online training coming up. Most of these are all our online classes. We also have some introduction classes that are 2-day in-house. You can see those are the classes that are in-house here in Grand Rapids, but everything in gray are the online classes. We do have some coming up, and we keep the website up to date. This website here, the 2020 commercialtraining.webex.com. If you go there, you can see our up-to-date calendar, and we keep that updated pretty frequently. If you have questions specifically on training, oh, I don't see my email address here, but let me just post it here for if you have questions specifically regarding training. We have my commercial.training@2020spaces.com if you are interested in training specifically. That's the email there. But that's it on training. Feel free to email me if you have questions or looking for training.
Okay, and we're now at the end of our session. I'd like to thank all of you for coming. There is an open thread on the Cube right now about today's webcast, so if there's any suggestions you would have about how we can make this better, please feel free to put them into that thread. And again, we'll follow up with questions, and thank you. We got a lot of really good questions today, so thank you, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the next one.
Thanks, everyone.